Britain's exit from the European Union, EU, remains deadlocked after the UK Parliament failed to agree on any alternative to Prime Minister Theresa May's divorce deal. After a tumultuous week in which Mrs May's strategy was rejected by politicians for a third time, despite her offer to quit if it passed, the future direction of Brexit remains mired in confusion. In a bid to break the impasse, MPs on Monday, local time, voted on 4 alternative Brexit options, but all options were defeated. The option that came closest to securing a majority was a proposal to keep Britain in a customs union with the EU. But that plan was defeated by 3 votes. A proposal for a confirmatory referendum on any deal got the most votes, but was defeated 292 to 280. The government is firmly opposed to both of these. The first, because it would mean giving up the freedom to make the independent trade deals longed for by many Eurosceptic MPs. The second, because Mrs May said it would betray voters who were promised the result of the 2016 referendum would be implemented, and potentially solved nothing. Video: large crowds of protesters rallied in favor of a swift exit from the EU. ABC News: possible 4th vote on May's Brexit deal. Brexit Minister Stephen Barclay said after the results were announced that the default position was still that Britain would leave the EU on April 12 without a deal to soften the economic dislocation of an abrupt departure that is seen as a nightmare scenario for many international businesses. The only option is to find a way through which allows the UK to leave with a deal, Mr Barclay told Parliament. He hinted that Mrs May could put her deal to a 4th vote this week in the hope of securing an orderly exit before European elections are held from May 23, an unpredictable complication the government is determined to avoid. If the House were to agree a deal this week, it would still be possible to avoid holding European parliamentary elections, Mr Barclay said. Mrs May is due to hold 5 hours of cabinet meetings with senior ministers on Tuesday, local time, to plan the government's next moves. Last Friday, the third defeat of Mrs May's own withdrawal agreement left one of the weakest British leaders in a generation facing a spiralling crisis over Brexit, the UK's most far-reaching policy change since World War II. MPs warn of consequences for supporting deal keeping close EU ties. Her government and her Conservative Party, which has been trying to contain a schism over Europe for 30 years, are now riven between those who are demanding Mrs May pilot a decisive break with the bloc and those demanding that she rule out such an outcome. If Mrs May was to throw her weight behind either camp, she would risk tearing her party apart and bringing down the government. Conservative MP Nick Bowles, architect of the single market option, acknowledged he had failed in his attempt to break the deadlock. "I have failed chiefly because my party refuses to compromise," Mr Bowles added, announcing that he was quitting the Conservatives to sit as an independent in Parliament. Some Conservative politicians have warned they would support a motion of no confidence if she accepts calls for a Brexit that maintains many of the existing close economic ties with the EU. Britain had been due to leave the EU on March 29, but the political deadlock in London forced Mrs May to ask the bloc for a delay. As things stand, Britain will now depart on April 12 unless Mrs May comes up with another viable option. The view from the EU. From EU officials watching from Brussels, there was one plea: make up your minds. A sphinx is an open book compared to the UK, European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said. Nobody knows where it is heading. We'd like to make the sphinx talk and tell us in which direction they would like to go. Hardline conservative Eurosceptic Marc Francois has provided one possible clue. What took place in the House of Commons this evening was an attempted coup against the British people, and the coup has failed, he said. I think no deal is now highly likely. ABC/Wires